We're dealing with the Protestant Reformation, and we talked about the first decade, 1517 to about 1525 or so, with all the influences being made as God was working the hearts of many in different places throughout Europe. Then we come to like 1527, and this Slithine Confession of Faith. It's the Anabaptist First Confession, and they simply state what they believe the Bible teaches, talking about how they should be separate from church and state and other issues as well. In 1530, there's the Augsburg Confession. Philip Melanchthon wrote. He's a disciple of Martin Luther, and so he helps share those Lutheran beliefs. And so now not only have these movements started and they've gained some traction, but now they're stating what they believe the Bible to teach, as opposed to what some of the Catholic doctrine that had been so influential. By 1534, there's the Act of Supremacy, and then Henry VIII becomes head of the English Church. He had sought an annulment of his first marriage because he doesn't have a son. He wants to be able to pass on the line of the monarchy through his son. And so he wants to get rid of his wife, but the Roman Catholic Church won't do it because they're fearful. She's related to the King of Spain, and Catholic Church has close ties with the King of Spain. They don't want to make Spain unhappy, and so the Catholic Church won't grant that. He's not sure what to do. Thomas Cranmer comes along and says, as a theologian, well, you could just divorce her, and you could set yourself up as the head, and we don't need the Catholic Church anyway. And so we start what's called the Church of England, or Anglicanism, as Henry becomes that, and he starts, as the Catholics would say, stealing their properties throughout England, as he establishes those as Anglican churches. And that would set up a challenge in the years ahead, as Henry was still largely Catholic in his theology, but willing to make some changes when they have the Bible in English now, and he's approved of that, and they have him as the head. There's going to be this movement between Protestants and Catholics as to what England's going to become. That'll be fought over for the next several years. By 1536, John Calvin published the first edition of his Institutes of the Christian Religion, which becomes the most important theological treatise of the Reformation era. So important so that it's still influential today, nearly 500 years later, just with Calvin going through sort of what we might call a systematic theology and writing, expounding, really the first Protestant to expound on all these various doctrines of the faith. Also in 1536, you have Menno Simmons, who's baptized as an Anabaptist. He becomes an influential leader. Eventually, a sect would break out known as the Mennonites from his work that's still popular today. By 1540, Loyola gains approval for the Society of Jesus, also known as the Jesuits, soldiers of Christ, who help preserve and extend Catholicism. So they are willing to defend the faith intellectually, but especially physically. They're willing to go out and fight in order to advance the spread of Catholicism throughout Europe, as well as defend it against the spread of other forms of Protestantism. By 1545, the Roman Catholic Church realizes, hey, we've not gotten a good grasp of this Protestant Reformation. They thought they could stamp out Luther and some of the early efforts like they had done in the past, but now with the printing press, the word spreading much too quickly for them to put a stop to it. And so from 1517 to 1545, almost 30 years, they've let it go on, but then they call a Council of Trent. And it's there they want to state where they officially stand against Protestantism. And so they chart the Catholic Church's course for the next 400 years. And they condemn a number of books written by Protestants. They make it clear that they believe doctrine of justification, how someone right with God is by faith and works, or by grace and human merit. So they really make their statements clear here. They believe in the Apocrypha as being part of the Bible. It has never been officially adopted until the Council of Trent. Themes that taught some strange, like Second Maccabees taught strange doctrines, including purgatory, praying to the dead saints, things that aren't taught in the Bible, but are referenced in a couple of places in the Apocrypha. By 1549, Thomas Cranmer releases the Book of Common Prayer, which becomes almost as important as the Bible in the English church because it helps set up how they are to do worship
and breaks apart and makes a clear break with Catholicism. The challenge that he would have, as well as others in England, is who was on the throne. So after Henry winds up dying, his son Edward VI is sickly and doesn't reign very long. And then you have his oldest daughter Mary. And so Mary is known as Bloody Mary. She rules from like 1553 to 57 and just kills off several hundred Protestants because of her Catholic faith. Her mother had been Catholic and she's not happy what had happened with her. And so she pushes that. She winds up, Cranmer, among some other English leaders, wind up dying for their faith and what they stand for. It's just not a good time to be a Protestant when you're going up against a Catholic who wants to see others die because they think they're spreading something false. But then you have Elizabeth come on the front throne from 1558 to 1603. She's a Protestant. She doesn't want to just kill off the Catholics. She wants to work together, but really helps promote that. And we're going to see she wants to also promote that in other ways as they explore through charting new territories throughout what would eventually become an empire. By 1549, you have Xavier, Catholic Xavier, beginning his mission to Japan. By 1555, you have the Peace of Augsburg, which is signed there in Germany, and it's to allow German Lutherans and Roman Catholics to peacefully coexist after several years of war. By 1555, Latimer and Ridley are burned at the stake, much like Cranmer had done. Now their lives are required of them, also during the time of Mary's reign. By 1559, one of the great disciples of John Calvin is John Knox, and he's out of Scotland. He's a strong Calvinist theologian, and he returns to Scotland for the final time and champions a bloodless revolution. They got enough influence there. They don't need to fight. They can just begin to enforce their doctrine. The Scottish Presbyterians are highly influential and just really sweep through that land as God brings a revival to them. By 1563, we see Fox's Book of Martyrs is published, and it traces all the way back to the times of the apostles and how they were persecuted and gave their lives for Jesus, but then also tells us about more modern day, so up through the age of the Reformation, how they were able to stand strong for the faith even in the midst of giving their lives for Christ. 1582, in the Catholic Church, you have Ricci and Ruggieri begin their mission to China. By 1598, you have the Edict of Nantes, which ends the persecution of French Protestants, the Huguenots, the French Calvinists. That would stay in place until it was revoked in 1685, but there was a time of peace that was being promoted there. By 1609, you have John Smith, who's the first Baptist. He baptized himself and then starts baptizing others, and they start arguing for believers' baptism by immersion, because that's what the word baptism means. In 1611, you have King James Version of the Bible published, so there's a few other English versions before it, but it becomes the most popular one for the next several hundred years, even to our own day, where a number of scholars were commissioned to translate that and use it sort of a very poetic, high-level type of English that was used for hundreds of years before other rivals began to come on the scene in the 20th century. Continue the era of Reformation again in the next video.